Too many condo buyers here in Vancouver are walking into a financial disaster thinking that they scored a deal in these buyer market conditions, and before they realize it, their contract has been fulfilled and now they own a financial liability. I'm going to be going over the exact type of condos you need to avoid right now in this buyer's market so that you're not stuck with a condo that is going to lose its value and be impossible to sell when the time comes for you to move. From abnormally low strata fees to long angled floor plans to even the construction material on the exterior of a building, there are so many items that can make you really regret your purchase, and if you're not aligned with the right agent to guide you through it, can really cost you tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So let's talk about strata fees first. Abnormally low strata fees are not something that is good. It screams as a red flag and something that you should avoid at all costs. I understand as a buyer, it's so expensive to purchase property in Vancouver. You're pinching pennies and you're trying to have as much savings as possible, but you don't want to sacrifice on the strata fees. And the reason why I say that, the strata fees are the lifeblood of the building that you're purchasing. You're not just purchasing that one little square unit of 500 to 700 square feet, whatever the size may be. You're buying into a complete whole development. And if there is not an accounting system where there's a robust system of strata fees and an operating budget that can maintain that building, you may be able to save $100 or $200 a month for the first maybe year or 2 years, but that will catch up to you, because if you have a reactive strata, which usually means abnormally low strata fees, you're not working with a proactive strata. So what that means is when you are needing new windows done, if there's a roof replacement, if you have not been saving enough money up, you're going to be hit with a massive special levy. So it's really important to get into those strata documents and to see how that building is voting. If you are looking in your strata documents and you see that the strata continues to vote down routine maintenance, that is a red flag. You don't want to be part of a strata despite how much you love that unit, because if they can't care for the building, you are going to take a huge hit in the terms of a special levy at some point, or a buyer's just not going to want to purchase a unit in the future because they can see that there's going to be these massive projects that are upcoming, and with that there's no money in the contingency reserve fund because they haven't been saving with it because of those low strata fees. So obviously you don't want something obnoxiously high if it's going to put off your lending, but you want to find a nice middle ground in terms of buying into a building that can sustain itself with the strata fees. When buildings are coming up to that 25-30 year mark, a lot of the major infrastructure is going to need replacement, from the roof to the elevators to windows. A lot of these big items that will cost a lot of money are due to be replaced in some capacity. So if you're looking at older condos, you are going to want something that's a little bit higher when it comes to strata fees, or you're going to be paying with it with a massive special levy. And then when it comes to strata fees, it's also important to understand how many units are in a complex. Obviously, if you're buying into a smaller strata of maybe 10 units, 12 units, 14 units, a boutique style, you are going to have to share a lot more of those costs when those big projects come up. So that is another thing you want to keep in mind, is the overall size of the strata itself, because if you are not putting enough money away on a monthly basis for the development, and your unit and the development itself is very small, those special levies are going to be larger and larger and larger. There can be special levies that can be 6 figures. So you got to be very, very careful when you're doing the due diligence to understand the depreciation report, to understand what's going on in the building, how the strata itself has been voting, and if there's going to be enough money in there to be able to curtail that cost. Because even if you have a strata fee, you're still going to want to have some sort of contingency reserve fund of your own that you're putting money aside on a monthly basis, because at some point there will be special levies. Every single year, strata fees likely should be going up a couple points just to cover inflation. But you got to remember, you're not just buying into this one little unit, you're buying into the whole development as a whole. When we talk about that one little unit, the other thing that's important is overall floor plan. And there are so many floor plan mistakes that people get into because they love the location or they love the building itself or the aesthetic. But a buyer, when you're looking to sell, is going to really hammer you on some of these points. And especially right now in this market where we've seen the most amount of inventory since 2014, you can be extremely, extremely picky. You have a lot of choices. So when it comes to floor plans, we want to look at something that's completely open, something where there's no wasted space. You can sometimes get into these long, narrow floor plans where there's a huge hallway and you can waste 30 to 60 square feet right off the hop. And if you're looking at a 600 square foot condo, 10% of your units wasted in a hall. So you want to avoid things like that. You also want to avoid those long, narrow units as well, because it will feel like you're living in a basement suite. If there's only one portion of windows and you're in those longer, skinny units, it feels like you're in a basement suite. Buyers do not want that. There's a lack of natural light. Usually there's a small galley kitchen, and the overall dynamics of those units are not great. There's some buildings in Gastown, even ones the Jacobson in Vancouver, very long rectangular type units. There's some also in some projects around where I live on Fraser Street where, yes, they look great, they have great finishes, but when you're sitting in the back of the unit, and usually that's where your bedroom is, and there's barely any natural light, and because we live in an area where it's about dark 8 months of the year, you're going to pay the consequences of that. So when you're looking at units, it's really important to understand what type of day you are in as well. If you're looking at the summer and everything is nice and bright, that's great for the 2 or 3 months. But for the remainder of the year, it's not going to be like that. So it's going to be important to understand when you're looking at that unit, what the direction of that unit is, as well as how much light is coming in there, and to know that, you know, if you're looking at it at a rainy day, that's probably optimal, because that's the worst it's going to be. And then you can make a judgment for yourself if that is somewhere where you want to live. When we talk about floor plans as well, I hate floor plans that have angles on it. I'm going on a buyer's tour this weekend, and some of the properties that were brought up that we actually nixed off the list is a lot of these floor plans that have some weird angles in the hallway, or maybe they're curved around the edge. And the reason for that is because you're going to have a ton of wasted square footage. It's impossible to be able to center something around a TV or a dining room table. And if you have a weird floor plan that doesn't work, it's going to be an issue down the road. And remember, you're not just buying this for yourself, you're buying this in the future. And whether it's going to be a rental property or something that you want to sell in the future, you want to be able to appeal to the broadest base of buyers so that your property can appreciate well. And you never know the climate that you're going to be in when you're selling. Right now, the market is very tough, and I'm working with a couple sellers right now. Life circumstances changing, they need to sell, but because there's been deficiencies in their floor plan, into the view corridor, even over the aesthetic feel, we can't move these properties no matter how hard my sellers want to move them. So you never know what kind of market you're going to be in when you sell. So that's why it's so important to have a unit that's going to appeal to everybody when it does come time for you to sell. So remember, stay away from anything that's angled, where you're going to have wasted floor space, anything that's curved where you can't put things together. I've also seen some floor plans where they have the fireplace or the TV dynamics is really awkward. You can't really put a couch there. So you really want to envision the space. Where are we going to sit and eat? Because that's very important. Where we're going to sit and watch TV or congregate. And sometimes in these floor plans, you can only do one. And that's not ideal either. And as we wrap up the floor plan section of this, the other thing to keep in mind, you want an open concept layout. These older builds that have the compartmentalized kitchens, people don't want those anymore. So unless you're willing to open up those kitchens, that is also something that people don't want. That is something that if you are buying, you're likely going to want to invest in opening up that space as well. So unless you're getting a really good deal on a unit where you can put some of that money in to upgrade the space as a whole, you're going to want to stay away from that. And like I said, right now in this climate, you have so many options. Unless you can't get into that next tier that you need, don't be putting yourselves in these positions. You can be picky. This is the opportunity for you in this market to be picky. Let's talk about view corridors here for a second. So obviously, if you can get a view corridor, that's amazing. That really helps with appreciation. But keep in mind, there's pros and cons, and there's trade-offs for that too. You know, if you are in a building, and I sold one here in the Strathcona Village, beautiful north-facing sightlines, mountain and ocean views. But because of the direction of the sun and some of the floor plans are a little bit longer, they get very, very dark. So you may have some good floor plans in terms of the view corridors, but keep in mind if you have a north exposure because you want those mountain views, your unit could be quite dark. And the other thing with that too, you can have some great views as well, but if you're on an alley and there's a ton of power lines, you're going to want to stay away from that too, because people will not overlook those power lines no matter how good your view is. They don't want to be looking at those items either. So that's something that you want to address as well, making sure that you don't have any deficiencies hanging in your windows. And obviously you want to understand what's being constructed around you too, because you don't want to lose your view corridor with a construction project. So that's something to keep in mind, and doing your due diligence as well is making sure you understand what is going to be built, if there's anything that is going to hamper your viewpoint, because if you're paying for the view, you don't want to lose it in a couple years either. In Vancouver, obviously it rains a ton, so understanding the construction of the unit that you're purchasing is very important. I tend to want my clients to stay away from any stucco building because those were prime candidates for leaky condos. The way that they constructed those didn't allow the water to permeate behind the stucco itself, because stucco is permeable. Water would not just flow off of it, it would absorb, and because they didn't have the proper spacing when they built these in the 80s and early 90s, in behind, all the plywood would start to rot. So you've heard of a term called rain screen. That is non-negotiable if you're looking at a stucco building. And how they build out rain screening is giving some distance between the stucco and the sheeting to breathe and to let any water that comes in behind the stucco to be able to drain out from the bottom. So it's really easy to identify if there's been rain screening. It should be in the minutes, and it should be something that's celebrated by the selling agent. But you'll see on portions of stucco buildings, usually at the bottom of each floor, you're going to see these long horizontal runs, and there's going to be this channeling here, and that allows the water to come out, and it shows that, at every around 8-foot or 10-foot section, depending on the ceiling heights, there should be these long horizontal tracks, and that is a clue that that building has been rain screened. So you want to be very cautious. There's a ton of these older buildings that don't have it. Sometimes you'll find a building that has a partial rain screen. That's great, and even if your unit is part of that partial, at some point they're going to have to do the remainder of it, and these rain screen projects are very, very costly, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So be very cautious of stucco builds, and you have to ask the question each and every time, has this building been rain screened? So do some homework even on YouTube to understand what it is, so when you go out on a showing, you can easily identify it if that building has been rain screened, because that is very, very important. And when it comes to any of these bigger projects, and we talked about it in the Strata Fees section off the top, but even understanding the contingency reserve fund and understanding how much money is in that pot, and then even dividing it between every single unit so you can come up with a calculation. Usually if you have a strong CRF, you're going to be in that $3,000 to $5,000 range per unit. If you're well under that range, that's something that you got to be cautious of. Like I said, with low strata fees as well as CRF numbers, you do have to do a little bit of digging, because if the CRF fund is low, but you go into the minutes and you can see that, for example, they did a full rain screen project, they replaced the roof, they replaced the windows, then it makes sense why that CRF fund is low, because maybe they funded a lot of those projects from it. So it's not a one size fits all strategy here. There's going to be some push and pull, and that's why doing a lot of this investigation and working with someone who understands these minutes is very important. I have 11 years of construction background, so it's very easy for me to identify problems. I also use an AI software to help go through some of these documents, because you can get into a condo and there can be, depending on the size of the depreciation report, 500-600 pages of documents that we need to go through, and we can't miss any important items. So it's important that you have that type of system in place, so that when you're reading through these documents, you can make a good decision. It shouldn't be something that frightens you. If you're frightened with it, with your current support, it's likely not a good fit, because it shouldn't scare you off. You can get all the answers in regards to if this is a strong building if you do the reading properly. And just because the building's old doesn't mean that you need to stay away from it either. And when we round this whole thing out, there's other items that are really important, and that comes with parking and storage as well. If you're looking at smaller units, obviously storage is going to be a big problem. Units that don't have a storage locker are very problematic, and even units now that don't come with a parking stall are very problematic as well. We know that more and more condos are not having those parking stalls, so sometimes it is a little bit more advantageous to buy something that's older, usually a bigger square footage, and you'll have a parking stall and a storage locker as well. And when you're looking at a 2-bedroom unit, there's a lot of 2-bed units that only have one parking stall. Trying to find a unit, if it's a 2-bedroom, that also has both of the parking stalls are going to be really important for you as well. So there's a lot of these things when it comes to buying a condo, from the layout to what's included with it, from the upgrades of the building itself to the CRF to the condo fees. It is a lot, and that's why it's really important for you to be able to have that support going through this. And on my last point here is just making sure that you understand the bylaws and the rules, especially for Vancouverites here. Pets are so important. If you're buying into a unit that has pet restrictions, that can really bear down on your buyer pool. Most people have a cat or a dog or both. So even if a building allows pets, you need to understand what those restrictions are. Sometimes there's certain breeds that can't live in a building. Sometimes there's certain heights in terms of the shoulder height or the weight, or just one of each, or one cat and no dogs. And it's really important for you to go through these strata documents with a fine-tooth comb, because you need to understand the rules and obligations to you, because just because you're buying a condo, you are not the king of the castle. You do have to live with others, and there's rules and regulations. And for those who don't want to participate in that, it can be very serious. And stratas can actually sell your home from underneath you if you do not comply with the rules and the bylaws in the building. It will start with fines, it will start with judgments, and if you do not pay those and you do not continue to listen to what is going on in terms of the bylaws and the rules of the building, you can have your building put up for sale from the Strata Corporation. So it's really important that whatever the rules and the regulations are in a condo building, that you adhere to them, because there can be serious consequences. So as I wrap things up here, I don't want you to be fearful of any of this. Like I said, this is super positive. We're in a complete buyer's market. You have a ton of selection. You should be able to get all these items on my list in a unit at a good price right now. And if you need some help in your condo search, make sure you book a discovery call with me in the description below. I can go over my process, and you'll be in great hands. I do this all the time, and all my clients feel very secure when they purchase condos, whether they're new or old. It doesn't matter. But until the next one, I'll talk to you later.